What is up? What is up? What is up? Welcome back to another episode of the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com, brought to you by Johnny T-Shirts. All right. What's good, everyone? Everybody, everything, every soul, every sinner, every saint, everybody who has decided to join us on this episode of the Coast to Coast podcast. I'm Joey Powell for Inside Carolina. With me, as always, the KC and JoJo of my life, all my life, Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran. Sherrell, how are you?
I'm good. Ready to talk about a interesting weekend for UNC.
Interesting. The man is already throwing out understatements of the year. Sean, how are you?
I'm doing good. I think my body's finally calmed down from that Saturday morning.
Your body was not ready for what happened yesterday afternoon as we record this on a Sunday. Tar Heels knocked off number one Baylor after absolutely thrashing the 9 seed Marquette on Thursday night. Guys, there's a lot to talk about today. I'm probably going to miss some stuff because there's just so much there and so much on the bone. I'm going to try to get to as much as we can, but it's just I didn't think we would be talking about a Sweet 16 North Carolina team a month ago, and I know it's become it's become trite, and it's something that you've heard 1,000 times if you listen to the show, but I can't say enough about how, I guess, unexpected this journey has been. Sherrell, can you think of anything more satisfying for Tar Heel fans than what they're watching right now with Hubert Davis's first team?
No, I think we always talk about paths not being linear and things don't go exactly the way you think they should. But I think at the beginning of the season, the end result people will be fine with. Again, my favorite saying, the what I think people are fine with, because they're in the Sweet 16. They won a game that no one thought they would ever win at Cameron. They had a great stretch to close out the season. It is the profile very similarly to some of Roy Williams's good teams, in that they struggle finding their identity for the first few months. And then usually there's a galvanizing moment at some point towards the end of January, early February. And from then on, they're kind of off to the races. And again, outside of the Pittsburgh game, that's been the story for this UNC team. It's just a tremendous job by, I think, Hubert Davis and his staff. Jay Billis was on game day today, and he was just basically saying that Hubert Davis stuck with it, what he wanted to do, how he wanted to do things, and just it took some time for it to really gel. And I think, between these last two games in the NCAA tournament, you're seeing the offense that was promised. You're seeing the skill sets that were promised. You're seeing all the stuff that we heard from, I guess it was April 5th last year, until the season started, and through the season, the spacing and the shooting and the movement and the passion and the toughness. Like everything that Hubert Davis has preached for the last year was on display, more so in the Baylor game, but all throughout the Marquette game as well. And I think I'll let Sean go, but I think the Baylor game, to me, you saw everything possible from this UNC team. Everything it's done was in that one game. There was just some breathtakingly awesome offensive play, to be frank, for stretches. When they were up, they got up 23, and you're just like, this is really going to happen, huh? I think their win percentage before the ejection was at like 98.6% or something like that. You saw mind-numbing turnovers and just a lack of IQ at some points, where guys are dribbling around and not sure what they're doing. You saw them lose unexpectedly 2 players who they thought would be in the lineup, just out of nowhere. Didn't see it coming, just kind of happened, and they had to pick up and move forward. So everything that they've been through, the adversity, through the season, and losing people and losing huge leads and getting blown out, all that stuff came to fruition and happened multiple times in one game against the defending champion. So to me, that was the biggest story, was that everything they had done previous to this prepared them for that game.
Well, we can wrap the show now. But a great opening answer, Sherrell. Sean, I want to ask this to you. You're looking at a North Carolina team that is now 26-9. They have won 16 of 19 games. They've won 8 of 9 games. Sherrell mentioned, it was a very common trait of Roy Williams teams that they would kind of have this moment of galvanizing force that will bring them together. And I think Dean Smith's teams are very much like that too, where they would kind of start peaking in March. I don't know that anybody saw this coming to where this team would be peaking not only in March, but would be peaking in the tournament. We saw against Marquette and Baylor a team that was really good offensively and really good defensively. Is there something in your mind, whether it's schematically, or is there something in your mind that's just jumped out at you that's changed in that last, say, 2 to 3 weeks that's really got them just grinding at such a high level?
I think if anybody saw it, we got to give Sherrell credit because he's always been talking about the talent on this team, which, I think, if you're Baylor entering that game, you probably felt like you had the short end of the stick playing. Sure, you're playing an 8 seed, but that's not an 8 seed out there in terms of when they're clicking. You mentioned 8 out of 9, and but in those 8 out of 9, you had the highs of playing extremely well against Duke, but then you had the lows of two, even with the blowout of UVA, but two very subpar offensive performances in the ACC tournament. So once again, we've talked about volatility with this team, and when they're clicking, they're rolling. They're hard to beat, but at times they can go cold and give up open shots. But to that extent, I think you've seen just the joy. I think the joy of the team definitely changed from earlier in the year. Of they didn't really look like they enjoyed playing with each other early on, and it was almost kind of a lot of selfish basketball at times. But I think now you're seeing everybody started to kind of understand their role, and within those roles, they've all gotten a lot better as time has gone on. And now I think you really have 5 guys playing out there together and playing for each other. And I think that's been one of the keys to the success we've seen.
Even watching, yesterday after Caleb Love was disqualified with his 5th foul, seeing him on the sidelines, and, I have to throw this out because he's been so maligned by listeners of this show and folks on the Inside Carolina message boards. He's been so maligned as maybe a selfish player. And I don't think you can watch yesterday's action down the stretch after he fouled out and say that he was being selfish, because I saw a kid that was absolutely just enraptured by what was going on the court and was so thrilled for what was happening for his teammates. And I saw a kid just like anybody else that did not want to go home. And it was really refreshing to see. Sean, I'm going to stay with you here. I'm also going to let Sherrell talk about it because I know this is something that he has been very vocal about in the last 48 hours. But the knock on this team, and I keep going back to the Pitt game because to Sherrell's point, I think that was the point of galvanizing for this group. The Pitt game, Jason Capel said on the court after the game, in earshot of a lot of folks, that this North Carolina team did not want to play tough. We saw against Marquette, as we teed up last week, that Marquette was very much a team that was going to try to bully you. It's very typical of Shaka Smart's squads and how they like to play. And then Baylor, to Tommy's point from the Inside Carolina live show on Saturday, he talked about Baylor kind of being the varsity version of Marquette in a sense that they both want to mix it up. They're both really athletic. They're going to get up inside of you, and they're going to be really physical. I don't think you can say this team lacks toughness anymore. Sean, have you ever seen a team over the course of a month, and if you want to use the whole season, that's fine, a season that has gone from what looked very Charmony soft to now I see a bunch of guys out there that are playing like dudes with confidence, and they're not going to be punked by anybody?
I mean, I think over the long term, UNC has had that reputation, somewhat deservedly, but also I think it's been, because when you think of UNC, you think of a team playing up tempo, a team that can, outscore people. But, they've been one of the top offensive rebounding teams over the last 15, 20 years. Obviously fell off a little bit this year, but they're still pretty good. And, you're not going to be soft and be, to be one of the top offensive rebounding teams. But for this one, I mean, you also look at the guys, and outside of Armando, you don't have the physical, you never really have the physical enforcer type of look. So I think that also plays into it. But yeah, I mean, I think that has been the knock. And I think teams, and probably going into the game, the coaches are telling them, hey, you can out physical these guys, or even going back to that Kentucky game of, hey, once these guys get frustrated, they're done. They're not talking to each other, et cetera. I think, they've shown the willingness to fight back, be physical, get up in you defensively. Now with, I also think in terms of how we were just talking about roles, going to Leaky Black, defensively, he's always had that reputation, but I think he's really taken off since that Wake Forest loss, in terms of his ability. And I think, that goes to shutting down a wing player. You have Armando down low, getting the offense, offensive defensive rebounds. And then you have the guards, even though they're not the biggest guys, you have them playing hard and playing tough. So I think it has been nice to see. I think some of it is more a reputation that might not be deserved, but at the same time, that has been the focus probably for each and every team going into these UNC games.
All right, Sherrell, I'm basically just going to hand you a hot mic and let you go at it. But I want to let you talk about the toughness a little bit too. And if you want to come at this from a personality standpoint, I think that might be something our listeners would like to hear. Unmute yourself.
Sorry, for sure. Some third issues. For me, even though the Pittsburgh game, Jason Cable said that stuff and he got out and everybody heard it. I think the Louisville game at Louisville, to me, even though they lost the next game against Duke and subsequently lost a home game to Pittsburgh, to me, that's when the toughness kind of turned. Because if you remember, they had a big lead in that game and they started letting it go. It was very chippy. The guys were fouling Baycott and guys were hitting the floor and there were some questionable calls. It was not dissimilar to the Baylor game, honestly. The lead wasn't quite as big and the stakes obviously weren't as high. But for me, that's when you start to see some growth, toughness-wise. And I think what we saw from UNC against Marquette and then the last 10 minutes against Baylor and the last 5 minutes or overtime against Baylor, that is the definition of mental toughness. We have talked about what is toughness, what is mental toughness for years on Inside Carolina podcasts and message boards and stories and everything. And if I could distill that mental toughness into like one setting, it is dominating for 28 minutes the defending champion. I mean, dominating. It wasn't even close about who the better team was for the first 20 minutes. Not a question in the world. If you took somebody who'd never seen basketball, they would say, oh, the team in blue obviously is a better team and the team in white is just happy to be there. That's what you would have seen. From then on to potentially lose or have the biggest collapse in NCAA history, making just questionable plays over and over again. Obviously, there were some other factors at play. Don't really want to talk about that because it's been covered. But to pick yourself up off the mat when you've just been given a two-piece by Mike Tyson, essentially, and blowing that lead, to come out, Dontrez Styles, we've talked about all season. It's been, why isn't Styles getting more playing time? Is he happy? Why isn't he getting more playing time? Is he going to be ready? Got to develop the bench. Well, he played a ton of minutes. He had two really big plays to, frankly, keep UNC from losing in regulation. The steal on Sohan, and then he had a layup to kind of help stop the bleeding during that run. But he comes in and knocks down a three just like it's in practice, like he's in Kinston, playing against Leesville Road or whoever. That's mental toughness, the ability to put everything else out of your mind, the ability to do what you've practiced over and over, that you repped tons and hundreds and thousands of times. That's what mental toughness is. It is if you're Armando Baycott, after you missed free throw, seemingly after free throw, is going back up to the line, and eventually the two he hit, I don't think Baylor tied it after that.
No,
I think he got it to 86, 84. They come back and eventually get a free throw, and then Leaky Black gets Baycott gets the assist to Leaky Black for the layup, and they're up three, and that's as close as it was the rest of the game. So Armando Baycott essentially won the game at the free throw line, even though you could say they didn't win the game in regulation because he didn't, hit shots at the free throw line. So just opposing all that stuff from regulation to overtime, to me, you see what Hubert Davis has seen with his team. You see what he's been trying to instill in them. And that is the real definition of mental toughness, not this fake guy, fake tough guy stuff of knocking people down and screaming and doing cartwheels and all that. That's not mental toughness. Mental toughness is what you saw from North Carolina in overtime and parts of the second half.
Yeah, you can't mess with the Sohan. Yesterday was an entirely different show on his own. Eve, Cisco, Sade, whatever you want to call him, he was quite the detractor. And I think your point about mental toughness, right? The Tar Heels not only kind of got physically back with him, but they weren't going to be lured into the kind of the chippiness and the mind games. Like, Dennis Rodman, one of the things that made him such a great rebounder was he would annoy you, and to the point you would physically get out of your game, and that's how he'd start rebounding. And I saw a lot of that yesterday with Sohan, and I like that you pointed out the mental toughness and not being suckered into it, not being drawn back into it.
And shouts out to him, and shouts out to Matt Morgan who pointed this out. But he had a follow dunk to tie the game, missed it, and that was it.
Yep.
So
game over.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about Dontrez Styles there, and I was going to get to this a little bit later in the show, but it feels about right now. The kid had 15 points over the 2 games that he played, and had extended minutes. Looked, and granted, they were only fleeting looks against, in the Marquette game, but 3 for 3 from the field. I think he finished with 6 rebounds or so against Marquette, and then of course yesterday when he plays extended minutes against Baylor, 4 for 7 from the field, another 3 rebounds. His physicality and athleticism were much more on display against Baylor because, again, I think you saw more of it. Sherrell, what does it mean for a kid like that to not play and not play and not play, and then get thrust into the most pressure-packed of situations against the guys that are carrying the title belts? How do you explain what kind of a shift that is for a kid of his age as a true freshman?
Well, I think it says that the coaches are preparing him in practice for every situation possible. I think that's number one. I think 2, I think it says a lot about him, about his patience, because it's very easy to lose, especially when you're not playing, very easy to lose that edge because it's like, well, I'm going to get a, DNP coach's decision anyway. So why do I particularly need to be ready on this particular day? So I think that's 2. And then 3, we just talked about mental toughness. I think it shows the kind of mental toughness he has. One, I mean, a freshman, you're 18 years old, you've dreamed of playing at Carolina your whole life. The season hasn't quite gone the way you wanted as far as minutes. You get thrust into a game where they lose the biggest lead in NCAA tournament history. You're playing the most minutes you've played all season. And in the first possession overtime, you thought about a 3. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to take this 3.
Bucket.
Right. Like, so it's confidence, it's preparation, it's toughness. It's repping things in the gym over and over. It's all those things combined. And not to go too far, but we've seen before what a huge shot in March, how that can thrust someone into just a higher realm of basketball moving forward in their career. It's happened multiple times, not just at UNC. Obviously, people know who I'm talking about at UNC.
I was going to lead you there if you didn't go, and I love the fact that you're already taking us there. Go ahead, Luke Bay.
Yeah, it's happened multiple times, and who's to say it won't happen with Styles? I mean, that was to me. There's 2 shots in the game. Okay, I take it back. There's like 12 shots in the game that were super important, but I think of 2 in particular. Carolina was down 4-0, and they have a possession that was going absolutely nowhere. And RJ Davis, gets a cross-court pass from Brady Manick and sinks a 3. That settled everything down because who knows? They go down the court, make a 3, it's 7-0. Maybe things start to go bad again. So that was a huge shot. And then personally, I don't think there's any way they win that game if they get down in overtime. I just think there's no way. So to hit that shot, that was to me probably the biggest shot of the game. And obviously the biggest shot of his career thus far. So we'll see what happens moving forward. If you remember, we'll see what happens moving forward. Let's just leave it there.
I said on Twitter going into overtime, and I'm happily going to own this. I will sip tea and wear the dunce crown for saying that team that was on the floor wasn't going to beat their defending champs, because it just didn't feel that way. Nothing about it felt like they would be able to hold on. And to your point, Styles having the gumption to take it, and then to use a Royism, the gumption to make that corner 3 to put them up by 3. It's so.
And if you recall, he's a player. Sean? What was the number 1 question mark about Styles entering college?
Can he shoot from the outside?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that takes, as my old man would say, that took some brass ones, and he absolutely showed them. Sean, what do you think Tar Heel fans can expect about Dontrez Styles' game moving forward? Because like Sherrell said, you've seen guys like this use these moments as springboards to where they kind of just blow the barn doors open, and here they come, and this is who they are as a player, as a person, and as an athlete. What do you see now that Styles has kind of had a little bit of that limelight? What do you see his future potentially being as a player?
I mean, I think it goes to probably what we talked about in the preseason, that there could definitely be high potential for him given that athleticism. And what we just talked about, the weakness coming in was his 3-point shooting. He improved a lot his senior year, where he was making shots, but it's a lot different when you're getting 3 to 5 threes a game, and now you might get one. I think in that game he had two threes before that, and both of those looked online.
Yeah.
One of them was a perfect, obviously, opportunity for Armando, offensive rebounding wise, but they looked online, which I think, going back to Larry Bird, that's how you kind of measure the sign of a good shooter is how do they miss. So I know it was talked about in the post game, he was 2 of 12 coming in, but his threes have looked decent. Before I get to the question, so I think we've been accustomed to seeing Puff, being the guy off the bench first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with both Marquette and Baylor, you had two athletic, physical, long teams, and obviously the coaching staff realized that and said, "Hey, Dontrez is going to be a better matchup offensively and defensively," and he showed that with some key rebounds, just being able to match. And all of a sudden he's the most athletic guy in the court versus somebody on Marquette or Baylor. Now going to UCLA, that could potentially flip back where maybe Puff is more apt to be the one getting more minutes. But I think in the long term, it just should give him the confidence and can show kind of, what he can do, maybe in more, in a more expansive role. But I think it definitely provides a lot of confidence and ability to do that all the time next year.
Well, something that gives me a lot of confidence and should give you guys a lot of confidence is the ability of Johnny T-shirt to provide what you need with regard to your Tar Heel gear. I think that goes without saying. Johnny T-shirt is never going to be, distracted by a huge comeback. Johnny T-shirt's never going to lose their inventory to refereeing. Johnny T-shirt's always going to maintain a steady provision of goods and Tar Heel paraphernalia to Inside Carolina subscribers and Tar Heel fans around the globe. Check them out, johnnytshirt.com, right there on East Franklin Street. Weather's warming up. If you're in the Chapel Hill area, take a stroll down Franklin, stop in Johnny T-shirt, get some gear, get some new gear. Inside Carolina premium subscribers know that you get the extra 10% off top of their already amazing prices. Great selection, johnnytshirt.com. You can see all of that. And if you want to get a T-shirt to commemorate this Tar Heel run to the Sweet 16, Johnny T-shirt's got you. johnnytshirt.com. We appreciate them. They're big supporters of Inside Carolina, alumni owned, family operated. We're big fans of theirs. Check them out. Take a quick break, like the national guys come in here and run some ads. We'll be right back to talk a little more, break down some stats, and talk about what's next for this Tar Heel team. Who knows? We'll probably keep talking about this past week because just so much meat left on the bone. Stick around to the Inside Carolina's Coast to Coast podcast. All right, guys, I want to throw some stats at you before we continue our discussion of North Carolina's absolute hashtag beat them down of Marquette on Thursday, and then the epic game against Baylor on Saturday to get to the Sweet 16. 2 games played in the Dallas-Fort Worth Dickies Arena. Shout out to Dickies, outfitting Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg videos since 1993. 51 assists on 62 field goals. That is absolutely just NC-17 rated ball movement and sharing of the basketball, guys. Sean, you've talked ad nauseum about how great of a passer Brady Manick is. Sherrell mentioned that possession that got UNC's first basket against Baylor, where they did 30 seconds of pounding the ball into the ground, and then he has an absolute amazing cross court pass to RJ Davis, who catches it in rhythm, hits a 3 as the shot clock expires. Do you think that a guy like Manick is that influential to how this team shares the ball, or is it just like everything else, they're finally gelling and getting comfortable with sharing with each other, because, 51 assists on 62 field goals from 2 games, much less against NCAA tournament competition, is absurd. How do you feel like they've gotten to the point where they're just this good moving the ball around?
I think going back to late November, early December, every Sunday we were on here just talking, Brady Manick, great passer. He really moves the ball very well. The rest of the team, not so much. So I think, it was almost kind of him bringing everybody along. First it was really, the 2-man game with him and Armando getting great passes and very quick passes as well. And then I think little by little, as the guards have matured, as Leaky has been more aggressive, as Armando has looked to, if he's getting double teamed, I think you've seen, once again, the full team kind of start trusting each other and seeing what can happen when, if they're driving, hey, let's look at if somebody's cutting or somebody's out at the 3. Now that you, for the most part, have options. It's not like last year where you don't really have, you might have one option, Kerwin Walton, outside the 3-point line. So you have options cutting out at the line and then Armando down low. So I really think it goes to Brady kind of doing what he was doing early on, and everybody just, once again, getting more confident, more mature. And I mean, even Caleb Love, he'll still fire up the occasional, several dribbles, kind of a bad 3, but even Caleb, for the most part, he's been a lot better and looking to penetrate and kick and dish, which he's had a lot of nice passes the past few weeks.
Sherrell, I want to keep you here too. The sharing of the ball, I feel like, brings out personality of this team. And I don't want to go full Brene Brown, Dr. Phil, and everybody, but I do think, sharing is caring. And when you do have a team that's sharing the ball as well as this team is right now, it's allowing everybody to participate and everybody to benefit, whether it means getting their own scores in the scoring column, whether it means, feeling more involved. How do you see these personalities and these players' talents coming out now that they've learned how to just be more together on offense?
Well, I think it starts with your lead guard. And we've gone this far in the podcast and we haven't mentioned RJ Davis, which is a bit of a surprise. I guess we mentioned him a couple of times with the shooting, but as a lead guard, what he's done, I would say over the last, month and change. Yeah, there's a couple of games where he didn't play particularly well, but for the most part, he has helped transform this offense because he's getting the ball moving initially, and he's also pushing tempo. So between those two things, it makes it a lot easier, as we've talked about so many times. It makes it a lot easier to beat rotations when you're just a step ahead, and whether that's from the fast break, whether that's from driving and dishing, or whether that's from driving yourself and finding people for pocket passes like Baycott. There was one just really exquisite play yesterday from the right wing. Davis has a pick and roll. He sets up a pick and roll with Baycott. He goes behind his back, draws 3 defenders from Baylor, throws a little skip pass from his right hand, kind of between the 2 defenders, and Baycott gets an easy layup. And just his ability in pick and roll over the last month has been really, I think, a revelation for North Carolina in the way they play. And to me, that, as much as anything, is why the ball is humming and moving so much, because when Baycott rolls like that, he's rolling to the rim, but there's been several times where he stopped, pivoted, found Manick in the corner wide open for a 3. And it really is funny because I wish we could go back and listen to some of the stuff we said over the summer, because at the beginning of the year, we were totally off, completely wrong. Yeah. But I think what we're seeing now is what was expected, because, you have the shooters on the floor spacing, you have Baycott rolling, you have the middle court pick and rolls that they're running a lot. And it's fantastic to watch. And I think a lot of it, you can give a lot of it to Brady Manick. I really, you have to give some of it to everybody. Yeah. Honestly, it's hard to pinpoint one person, but I think I would start with RJ Davis because he's become a willing passer. And over the last couple of years with Davis and Love, that's been kind of the question mark was, can they be lead guards who facilitate and put their offense second? And I think they've both shown over the last month or so that they can do it. But I think Davis has just done it at a different level. And it's also freed up Caleb to be more of just a pure scorer, which I think, for this particular team at this particular time is what they need. And when that starts going, it starts going downhill because, again, you free up room for Baycott. Now even though Leaky hasn't made one in a couple of games, teams still have to think about it with him over there. And even if they do lay off of him, he's done a great job of being able to create the extra pass, which gets somebody open eventually. So I think it's all that, but I would say RJ Davis is the catalyst. I would give some credit to Manick as well, but I keep going back to Davis because, first game, career high in assists, 12 assists. I think the first time
one turnover.
Yeah, 12 assists, one turnover. The last time I remember somebody having, at least 10 assists at Carolina, I think with Theo Pinson, which is like 5 years ago, like a Miami game or something like that. So that hasn't been really a part of the offense for the last few years. So that's one. And then he comes back the next game and is just on fire and sets a career high in scoring. So we might have to get Ives on this, Brian Ives, who works for ESPN, but has there been a player who set career highs in 2 different categories in back-to-back games? Like, it just feels like that doesn't happen.
It definitely doesn't. It's not something that's happened in the recent past for Tar Heel fans and folks that follow this program. And as you said, against Baylor, he was absolutely just a whole bucket. He was confident. He was stepping in. When I knew he was on fire was UNC had one of their first transition opportunities of the day, and they get the ball off of a steal, get it up court, and somebody hits him, and he pulls up at the 3-point line, free throw line extended, and just drains it. And it's just one of those things where, like, okay, he's absolutely feeling himself, and it's fun to watch any player when they get into a zone like that. But I don't know why. I think it's a little more fun watching a kid like RJ Davis, who is absolutely deserving of Roy Williams's tough little nut moniker. Sean, I got some more stats for you. I know you're an efficiency guy. This Tar Heel squad held both Marquette and Baylor to under 1 point per possession in both games. And Baylor is, as much as they were known for driving the ball, they haven't been a great shooting team, but they absolutely could score from anywhere on the floor. Marquette, okay, I get that. But this is a Tar Heel team that sneakily has brought their defense to play on multiple occasions here recently. And when you see a team that's able to hold their opponents to under 1 point per possession, especially against Baylor, who had 81 field goal attempts, which is just ridiculous. Sean, what does that say for where this team is defensively, or at least with their confidence in playing defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think, going into Marquette, we were talking about matchups. And when you have a guy that can, either take away that stretch 4 or the wing like Leaky can, I mean, that just helps everybody else. But I think, that we were just talking about the guards defensively. I thought they have played extremely well defensively, especially Caleb Love. I mean, both. Well, we'll start with Caleb Love, but I thought he did a very good job on Akinjo, especially early on, where he was fighting through the screens. If anything, it was kind of the deep 2s, mid-range 2s that he was taking, and he finished with a lot of points, but he struggled shooting wise. I think 5 of 13 from 2, 1 for 7 from 3, or something like that. And then obviously Flagler got going, but I thought RJ, you could definitely see how much energy he was exerting defensively. So, I think if those two, if the guards can keep it up, and once again, you have Leaky, and then Manick is the guy that everybody's wanted to pick on during the regular season, of starting the game, going right at him. And he's been able to hold his own as well. And that'll be another significant factor against UCLA, is how do those matchups go? But I think in general, everybody's kind of been locked in, and with that, been competing pretty hard and have a good game plan from the coaching staff.
Yeah, you were spot on about Akinjo's ability. He did finish with 20 points, but it was on 6 of 20 field goals and 1 of 7 from beyond the arc, which you'll take that every day. And you're exactly right. There were some shots that he had early in the game that were very well contested 2s. And I think North Carolina's staff is probably more than willing to give those shots up, just because the long-term percentages aren't there.
And I think one other quick thing, because I know this was something I said at the beginning of the year, was UNC doesn't really have a shot blocking presence. But I think Armando has definitely gotten better at that. And when the guard, especially, I mean, Akinjo's a small guy. So when he was funneled into the paint and Armando was there, you had to feel pretty good that it was at least going to be altered. UNC ran into trouble where Armando was out of the paint and now they had kind of a clear path to the rim. But he's been doing a really good job as kind of that paint protector if he is there, and kind of, I think it helps everybody play a little tougher, knowing that, hey, if this guy blows by me, that's not the goal, but if he does, there's somebody that can help on the back end.
Sherrell, I'm sitting here looking at some of the stats in this game. I think, judging everybody's reaction from yesterday, when North Carolina started having the problems with Baylor's pressure, everybody thinks, well, God, why can't North Carolina learn to break a press? And I even saw some national writers who clearly, it was one of those situations where you can tell they just stopped on the game, hadn't watched North Carolina all year, but all of a sudden said, well, Hubert Davis needs to focus on breaking a press before whatever their next game is, and just do it for all 5 practices the whole time. And the reality is, I believe North Carolina absolutely missed the veteran presence of Brady Manick, but more so, they were lacking having that second ball handler. Talk about, in your opinion, how Caleb Love's contribution as a ball handler and North Carolina's decision to run a 2-ball handler offense was really, really hurt yesterday when Caleb picked up that 5th foul.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 players on the team really who, I guess 3 on the team who you feel kind of confident in with the ball in their hands, bringing the ball up the court, and that's Leaky, RJ, and Caleb.
Mm-hmm.
And Leaky was doing a lot of the inbounding, so that took him away for stretches. There were some decisions that I think he would have back. I think there was some Clemson from a couple of years ago flashbacks there, and that stuff is that stuff stays around for a while. I think that's going to be a big confidence booster for Leaky moving forward too, because it was a very similar situation, and they did just enough to get by. So just keep that in the back of your mind. If UCLA decides to press, I don't think they are really a pressing team, so there's not really anything to worry about there. But back to the original point, Caleb, for all his faults that people talk about him as far as what he can do and what he can't do, he's a guy who has the ball in his hands an awful lot. And pretty much he was gone within 2 to 3 minutes of Baylor's run starting. Mm-hmm. So you're going basically 7 minutes of that kind of environment, that kind of game, without a guy who was at times your primary ball handler. Mm-hmm. I think any team would have had trouble with that. I don't think that's really a Hubert Davis thing, because you don't want to also bring in another guard who maybe isn't the best ball handler or who isn't ready for that situation. You kind of go with the guys who got you there. And I think that's what Hubert Davis did. But I think it was a huge deal. And like you said, we've been talking for the last 3 months about how great of a passer Brady Manick is. You would think that in just a couple of those situations, he'd have been able to be an outlet, and he would have been able to find somebody streaking for a basket, or just been someone who's there to get the ball in bounds. And really, you're talking about 1 or 2 possessions, and it doesn't even go into overtime. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it was a huge deal. There's no other way around it. But again, I want to present a set of facts. Since we're talking about this, let's just really, really consider everything. So the game is in Fort Worth, Texas. I know Texas is a huge state, but it's much easier to get to Fort Worth from Waco than it is Chapel Hill. So you got that. Baylor is the number 1 seed. They played really well. They are the defending national champions. They destroyed their first round opponent. They're starting to get their mojo back a little bit, it seems like. North Carolina was up by 25. Again, the biggest lead that almost wasn't in NCAA tournament history. They lose. They play 6.5 guys pretty much per game. So you lose Brady Manick, who had 26 points at the time and was destroying people. You lose Caleb Love. It wasn't his best game, but he's a guy, again, who has the ball in his hands. And you insert Dontrez Styles, Puff Johnson, Justin McCoy for them. And those guys have played, but they haven't played a lot. Baylor is pressing. They're athletic. They're strong. Armando Bacot picks up a 4th foul. Every single thing in the world is going wrong, and they still found a way to win in that environment. And I just, that cannot be ever overstated, that they won the game in dominant fashion, had some calls go against them, and essentially lost the game, and then came back and won the game again. RJ Davis played 45 minutes in that environment against that press as the primary weapon on offense. So it's mind-boggling when you look at the stats and you say Carolina won that game. Like you said, Baylor took 24 more shots, 24 more field goal attempts than UNC. Mm-hmm. and Carolina still found a way to win. It's just pretty phenomenal.
I noticed after the game, the guys that were on the floor for basically the last 20 minutes of game action, two of them, as you just mentioned, Dontrez Styles and Justin McCoy. And I know Justin McCoy looked still a little uncomfortable at times, but his face and body language coming out of every timeout projected a kid that was confident and projected a kid that was not just, going to be blinded by the pressure and melted by the spotlight. And whether you want to, belabor what he contributed or whatever, if you want to just bang on the kid, whatever, that you're just going to be an angry person banging on a kid. But I think he absolutely, he did what the team needed him to do. Styles did what the team needed him to do, and you're called upon, and you win the game. And I think it's really fun for people around this program to see things like that happen, especially when you know how much work they've put in over the course of the year. All right, Sean, I'm going to come to you now. We're going to talk a little bit about UCLA. Actually, no, wait, I don't want to talk about UCLA yet. We're going to talk about UCLA kind of in the context of what I see as a very confident basketball team right now. This team, over the course of building their lead against Marquette and then finishing the game against Marquette, and then building their lead against Baylor, and then regaining at the end of the game once they kind of put it away those last 3 possessions in overtime. Sean, I see a very confident and talented basketball team. Do you see, are there things that you see that right now in kind of the vein of confidence that you think are unique to this moment and what we didn't see earlier this season, or if it's a returning player, something we hadn't seen before?
I mean, I definitely think overall that, they're playing extremely confident. Me being kind of the pessimistic one on the podcast last week, we were talking going into the tournament, 4 out of their 7 games, they've been, I think, below 30% from 3. And we've seen the volatility. And once again, they were great this weekend, but it's a completely different ball game and style of play, because I think the styles of play definitely suited UNC well, as we talked about last week. But once again, I think from a player and coaching perspective, they're going, it's not like they're going in saying, hey, we're an 8 seed, just happy to be here. I think they feel, hey, we're we're a 1 or 2 seed in our minds, and we're ready to compete, as far as we can go. So I mean, I think it's been great what they did, and now it'll just have to carry over in a different way against a much different team.
Sherrell, how do you feel like confidence might be pushing this team, or at least bringing more out of these guys than we've seen before?
Let's go back to 2014. There is a team who has a good amount of talent, and we've argued about that back and forth over the course of the year. This is 2013, 2014. They underachieved in the regular season, actually cut an L to UNC. Didn't even perform well down the stretch. But in the tournament, Coach Smith always says you build your momentum in the tournament. They won a couple of close games, and the Kentucky 2014 team got all the way to the national championship game as an 8 seed after beating the 1 seed, Wichita State, which is just a really tremendous game. Can't believe that's been 8 years ago. But you've seen how teams who are talented and maybe have underachieved can get on a run. And when the confidence starts going, it's hard to stop, because what can you tell this North Carolina team? What scenario can you put them in where they say, well, we can't do this? Mm-hmm. I mean, they going all the way back to Louisville, winning in that environment, winning at Clemson, winning 5 ACC road games in a row, winning in Coach K's last ever game, the way they beat Virginia in a poor offensive performance, and then the way they beat Marquette and the way they beat Baylor, and then lost to Baylor and then beat Baylor again. So I think that is the biggest thing, is that Hubert Davis now has more ammunition to use. He can fill his clip up and say, look, there's nothing you can't do, because I've seen you do it. I've seen you get blown out, and obviously we don't want that to happen again, but what that felt like, and how to prevent that. I've seen you dominate one of the best teams in the country twice in the last 2 weeks, so I know you can do it. So when you have that kind of momentum, you have that kind of confidence, and the coaches have that kind of ammunition, it is tough to stop. Now, can Carolina survive a situation where Brady Manick goes 3 of 12 and Caleb Love goes 4 of 15 and RJ Davis goes 2 of 10, we'll see. I'm not going to say they can't, because there's no way I would have said Caleb Love had 5 points and they were up by 30 some points against almost 30 points against Baylor. So they can find ways to win. And I think that's the most important thing, is that they've shown different ways to win games. And now that they've done that, is again, that confidence is hard to stop. So UCLA is going to be a tough game, though. Let's not act like, smooth sailing into the Final Four for UNC, because that variance seems to be gone. But it showed up a little bit against Baylor, and they just happened to have a big enough cushion to withstand it and win in overtime. But we'll see. I think a confident bunch is going to Philadelphia, and that's tough to stop.
Man, I got a little chill when you said what you said about the variance seems to be gone. I know the basketball guys don't like that. All right, Sean, this is your moment. This is what you have lived to do is help this North Carolina team or help fans of this North Carolina team prepare and preview a game against UCLA. They'll be playing on Friday in Philadelphia against UCLA. The Bruins come in 27-7, runner up. Were they runner up, or they did they semifinal loss? That's right. Last year, after UCLA was in a play-in game last year and got all the way to the finals. But UCLA coming out of the Pac-12, 10, 14, whatever number it is, their starters right now, Jaime Jaquez, Tiger Campbell, who had a phenomenal game against St. Mary's. I think he finished with 20 points or so. Johnny Juzang, former Kentucky transfer, Jules Bernard, and Cody Riley. Sean, just give us kind of a quick once-over of Mick Cronin's team and what Tar Heel fans and Inside Carolina listeners can expect from this matchup next week.
Sure. And, for UCLA, a lot of these guys having been in LA for six years now, I saw a lot in high school, just in the area, going to their games before they had committed to UCLA. So pretty familiar with these guys. You just rattled off the starters. They go, 9 deep, but a real strong focus on the top 5. Very talented offensively. And Mick Cronin has them playing a very strong defensive style. I think from, last year, if you remember their tournament run, it felt like Cronin was almost orchestrating every possession, both from an offensive and defensive standpoint. Offensively, to get Juzang and Jaquez, good looks, and then defensively, just really, stimming the opponent, slowing the game down, etc. And I think he could try to go back to that a little bit more. I think this year, for the most part, they're not an up-tempo team, but he's been letting them play. But I think, knowing UNC's talent, I could see him trying to script it, slow it down, one shot, etc. But UCLA offensively, they got 4 players scoring in double figures. Juzang's obviously the big name. I think Leakey will start on him. Jaquez got a little banged up against St. Mary's, but that's going to be, he's really, I'd say, the throttle that makes them go, because in their losses early in the year, they got beat real bad by Gonzaga, and they tried to go to him early against Drew Timme. He was just a little too small, because he likes to get the ball deep, bring it into the post, and hit a little 5-7 footer. So that matchup versus Manick is going to be huge. You mentioned Tiger Campbell, very solid point guard. He's actually shooting over 40% from 3. So, for him, I would imagine RJ would start on him, but that'll be a really important matchup. And then another guy who's been playing really well, Jules Bernard, is their shooting guard. And I think over the last 8 games, he's been in double figures. He's shooting about almost 50% from 3 in those games. So Caleb Love, I would imagine, will be on him. So that'll be a key matchup. And then you got Cody Riley, who I feel like I watched in AAU back in 2013. He was playing with like Steven Zimmerman and Ivan Rabb and those guys, because he was so old as a freshman. So he's playing 17U early on. But, he's going to be kind of the muscle that'll try to slow down Baycott, I'm sure, with some double teams. And then off the bench, you have Miles Johnson, transfer from Rutgers. Hasn't gotten a lot of playing time lately, but I think we'll probably see more of him. Top 50 in block percentage. So yeah. I could see them trying to give the size. And then, you've got Clark. He's kind of like a jackknife, 6'5", 6'6", but strong, athletic. He had a really good stretch kind of towards the end of the Pac-12 play, where double figures, 6-7 rebounds a game. And then the last two, Peyton Watson, projected lottery pick coming in, hasn't played a lot, but he's been given some energy minutes off the bench. He's long and lanky. And then David Singleton, who's a guy who hasn't really done a lot, but I do kind of worry about him being the guy that, comes in and all of a sudden he knocks down, 3. He's a guy that is scoring 9 or 12 points and hitting 3 or 4 threes, because he's another 40% shooter. So that's that's my rundown on UCLA. I think they're going to try to slow it down, run their offensive sets, and limit UNC to one shot. But I think this will be a fun matchup, and I'm glad it didn't happen earlier in the year, and that both teams are starting fresh.
Yeah, this UCLA squad, they're not as I don't think they're as prolific as folks are usually used to seeing. Like you said, they have a lot of guys that that can hurt you, and they're similar with their scoring distribution to what UNC saw from Baylor. Like you said, 4 guys, the average in the teens and points. I think Miles Johnson, as you pointed out, is a really wild card. I mean, he's their rim protector. I think you mentioned his top 50 in block percentage. He's probably going to be a bit of an equalizer.
6'10".
Yeah.
Sean, why do you think he's not playing more? Any ideas?
I mean, I think he does have a propensity for picking up foul trouble. But I also think we've seen UCLA start to go small as well, where sometimes you have Hawkes playing center, which they tried to do against Akron a little bit when they were really struggling down 5-7 points. And now you have really 5 shooters out on the floor. So I think, once again, he hasn't played a lot, but I think he could be a guy that they're looking to get some strong bench minutes from on Friday night.
Sherrell, UCLA 4 seed, we saw, I feel like the listening audience for this show probably saw more of UCLA last year, especially since the previously scheduled game with North Carolina was changed this year to Kentucky. How do you feel like North Carolina matches up against this UCLA squad? Did we lose Sherrell? Oh, there you are.
Watch. I'm still here. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, your Wi-Fi.
The only time I actually watched them, I watched the Arizona game in the Pac-12 conference, and then I watched a random Arizona State game. And the thing, I know I
remember that was an FS1 special. Yes,
yeah, it was. I don't know why I was watching that. It was life. But the thing that jumped out to me is that they seemed like a team at that time who was just kind of coasting. And I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is they've kind of been to the mountaintop, so to speak, and it's like there's nothing in the regular season that really can grab their attention because it's so far away. It's very monotonous playing Arizona State on a random Thursday night in February. Like, who gets up for that game? But I think what they have is championship level experience from last year. And if Hawkes is healthy, they have a bunch of dudes who have made huge plays the last 2 Marches. I mean, even Tiger Campbell against Akron, some of those shots that he made to keep them from losing to Akron were, pretty phenomenal. So I think more than anything, they have that going for them. And North Carolina, they've got two tournament wins, but the experience of UCLA, I think, could be a factor just because they have really been in every situation the last 2 seasons. And we're just that close to, playing for a national championship. So you can't discount that. And we'll see if it manifests itself at all on Friday.
Well, game time has still not been announced as we are recording this on a Sunday, but we do know that the Tar Heels will be playing the Bruins in Philadelphia on Friday. So I guess keep your eyes peeled for that. Probably by the time this posts, or at least by the time you are listening to this or it gets to your feed, maybe they've announced the game. So stick around for that. Boys, anything else that y'all want to talk about NCAA tournament related or anything regarding this North Carolina basketball run that we're all on right now? Sherrell, is there anything that I have glossed over today? Because there's so much.
I would just say, can you imagine North Carolina ever losing to a 15 seed?
Nah. Nope.
Never happened. I mean, there's lots of 14, but never 15 or 16 for that matter. So yeah.
That's tough. I wouldn't know what that's like. Sean, what about you, man? Is there anything you feel like we need to we need to make sure that we confront before we get out of here today?
No, I think we're good. I mean, for UCLA, I'll probably lose my mind if we see Juzang out of bounds play under the basket if he gets one of those curl mid-range jump shots, either going to the right or the left. So hopefully that's a focus. But you know, I work with a lot of UCLA people. I live not too far from the campus. It'll be fun to play that game, and I think it'll, you know, won't have the athleticism, length, talent that even a Marquette or Baylor did, but from a skill and just more matchups and gameplay perspective, I think it'll be a very intriguing game. But it's great that we're talking about it and we're not giving a postmortem to the season, and that there is, you know, one more, you know, at least one more weekend of basketball left.
Yep,
Hey.
we got more games to talk about. What's up, Sherrell?
Hey, Sean, I have a question. What would you do matchup wise? Just walk us through that defensively for UNC. Which assignment would you give to which player? I
mean, I'd play it fairly standard with RJ on Tiger, Caleb on Bernard, just because of the size. Bernard's 6'4", 6'5", so the size. But I could see maybe they try to flip it where, you know, you have Caleb on Tiger, but I think it'll be RJ on Tiger, Caleb on Bernard. Just, you know, and that will be a key matchup, because once again, going back to the Kentucky game, Calipari was just saying, hey, run Love around some screens and he'll lose interest. We've seen a lot more focus and better approach, but, you know, making some difficult shots. You put Leaky on Juzang. You know, he's been solid. He hasn't maybe lived up to what he did in the tournament, but he obviously has that ability to go off. And, you know, they're going to try to post him, pick and roll, get him open shots, but, you know, put Leaky on him, Manek on Hawkwez. That'll be a big one. I mean, I think for that, Hawkwez isn't going to explode by him. He is going to try to post him up and unders, maybe get him in foul trouble. So that'll be a key matchup. And then Armando on Riley. And I think just make sure Armando stays out of foul trouble and doesn't pick up any of those guys flopping offensively. So he's got to be careful when he lowers that shoulder sometimes. But you know, if he can stay in the game, you know, I feel confident in what Carolina can hopefully do.
Yeah, Sean, I got you earlier. I do get a big Greg Oden vibe from Cody Riley, not necessarily in his game, but just that the man feels like an elder, if you know what I mean.
I mean, he was 17 as a freshman. And that was, you know, some of those names I listed, Diamonds, you know, I'll have to go back and double check, but, you know, Diamond Stone, Henry Ellenson, like I remember Sacramento EYBL, like way back in the day.
Well, we appreciate the insight, man. I can't, this has been fun. I didn't expect that we would be having this podcast today. I knew we would have a show, but I didn't know it would be this content. So, hey, we got another week out of it, and it'll be fun to see what happens this coming week. Tar Heels playing UCLA in Philadelphia as they move on to the round of 16. Didn't expect we'd be here, but I do want to give you guys credit. You know, Sean, you stressed patience. Sherrell, you've said all along that this North Carolina team was talented, and they're starting to bear fruit. Matter of fact, when you came on the radio show Saturday, you were cautiously optimistic. I think you said the optimism was simmering. So
it was a good match. It really was a good matchup. Like I think there was fear from North Carolina to even say that, to put it in the atmosphere. But when you started to dig down into the numbers, this Baylor team just wasn't scary. They're good, don't get me wrong, but they weren't scary like last year's team. And you start looking at the people they lost and their profile, and just it was like, oh, they could actually do this. So that's where that optimism came from.
Well, it's whether you hesitated to speak it into existence or not, it happened. And I know Inside Carolina subscribers and listeners of this show are excited about it. But boys, thank you so much for joining us a little early today. We're going to get this out to the people because it's what they want. So we'll get this out a little earlier than usual, and maybe they'll enjoy it and as much as they've enjoyed this past week of basketball from the Tar Heels. But thank you to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring. Thanks to John Siegley for producing. For Sean Moran, way out there on the left coast. For Sherrell McMillan, not far away from the triangle down there in Happy Dappy Concord. I'm Joey Powell. This has been Inside Carolina's Coast to Coast podcast. We will talk to you very soon.